So this is a tutorial for the LMCF method, which stands for low move count corners first, which is a modernized corners first method that's a mix of EG for the 2x2 and Waterman for the 3x3. It's got the benefit of being statistically optimized so that it has the best chance of random pieces being solved and getting really low move counts. The move counts average move count's a bit less than Roux, depending on how many algorithms you learn. So in this method, you solve the corners with EG, which means CLL, EG1, EG2. If you don't know all those, you can use. You can even just use Ortega if you're fast. In my case, I use CLL and EG1. So for the first scramble, I see here I've got a nice white case, but I tend to solve on blue and green if I can find an easy case. And so if I can't find an easy case on my favorite colors, then I will solve in any color. But in this case, I have a nice case on blue as well. So I'm going to solve the blue face, and I see I'm going to get an EG1, so I'm going to put my bar at the back here. So now I've got the blue face on the bottom, and the bars at the back. So now I'm solving the top corners with EG1, and I see it's a pi case with the bar over here. And so now the corners are solved. Now as you're finishing this corners algorithm, you enter the transition phase, which is the most complicated and the most difficult part of this method. Now in my case, because I solve on blue and green, I end up with blue and green on the top and bottom. But what I'm going to do is eventually I'm going to rotate the cube and have blue and green on the left and right. You don't have to do it that way, but it does offer some advantages to do it that way. And the reason is that the transition phase is difficult. It's hard to move from solving the corners to solving edge pairs without having a lapse in your look ahead. And so the transition phase, if you do it properly the way I'm showing you here, you can eliminate any pauses. So immediately upon finishing the corners, I want to look at the top face, and I want to look for any oriented edge pieces. So in this case, I see I have one green edge piece that's oriented. It could be blue as well. So I'm looking for edge pieces that are either on the top face or the bottom face that are like on the top face. So it could be a blue or a green piece here. I see there's a green piece. Now it could be solved. I don't know that for sure, but it's usually not. And so I'm going to solve this piece, and while I solve it, I want to inspect the E slice, because the E slice is going to become the M slice, and this is where I'm going to be looking for edges to start my pairs with. You don't have to start with E slice edges, but that's the usual way of solving pairs with this method. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do an U2, and then I see this is a green and red piece, so I do an M, U, and M prime, and that's so simple and automatic that while I'm doing that, I'm twisting the cube left and right, and I see that I have a bunch of pieces in the E slice, and this is the one that I'm going to solve, the blue and red here. And so I've already got this, and I can see that the blue and red edge set is over in the left corner. So as I rotate it, I see that I have a green and yellow edge piece here, which is going to go here. So I can solve these two guys as a pair. So I put the blue and red piece in the back down position, and then I go like this, and now I've solved these two guys. So now the next edge piece in the M slice is this blue and white piece here, and I'm going to put that into here, and I'm going to displace this blue and yellow piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this guy over into the back down position, and when I solve this, what's going to happen is it's going to displace this piece, this blue and the green and orange piece, and so I can actually solve that as a pair as well. So basically what I do here is I go like this. So now I've solved the blue and white, the green and orange, and I've prepped the blue and yellow for the next pair. So now I've got the green and white here, which is going to go up into the right corner, and the blue and yellow needs to go into blue and yellow. So I do a U2. Now I've solved those two. Now the last edge piece is this this blue and orange piece, which needs to go here. So now we're in an L5E situation where you solve the last edge piece of the left and right side while simultaneously orienting the edges of the M slice. So what you do here is you set up this piece so that the blue or the green facelet is pointing down, and it's going to be either in the DF position or the BD position, and the algorithms are reflections. And so in this case, I've got it in the DF position, and it's going into the left slot. So we call this the DFL set because it's down front into the left. So the DFL set, if it was in the back down position, it would be the BDL set. And if the slot was on the right, and this guy was in the front, it would be the DFR set. And so that's how we name the different sets. And there's other variants as well. You'll see that all in the documentation. And so now, in this case, you basically execute that particular case. And you'll notice at the end there, I did an L2 because I want to line up the L and R slices. And so while you're executing the edge orientation algorithm from muscle memory, you want to examine the L and R faces so you can immediately adjust them so that they're the same. And now all that's left is to permute the midges, and you're done. Okay, this is the next scramble. So once again, we're starting off with the corners, and I'm going to solve on green here. So keeping the green center on the bottom, I'm going to do F2. Now I have the green corners on the bottom. So now I'm doing CLL, and I have an easy case here, H case. Now, as soon as I finish this, I'd look for oriented edge pieces. I'm in this difficult transition phase. So now I see one on the top, so I'm going to solve this, and while I'm solving it, I'm going to twist the cube left and right, and I see that I have two choices for E-slice edges here, the blue and red, and the green and white. The goal here is you want to see your first pair while you're still in this phase. And I'm going to choose the blue and red because I can see that that's going to go over here, and I can see that I can solve this other, any edge piece that's in the displaced slot can be solved as well. So I rotate. So now I'm going to put the blue and red in the upper left, and I'm going to put the green and red in the front right. And those guys are solved. Now I see I have the next E-slice edge here is green and orange. And so that guy needs to go here. And I have two choices for edges to displace on the left side, and so I could do either one and solve them at the same time. I'm going to solve the green and yellow, so I'm going to put that in the FR position while I put the green and orange in the upper right. So now I've solved both of those at the same time. And so basically now I have this blue and yellow piece, and I have the green and white piece, which are the last two edges. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve the blue and yellow, and that's going to displace this blue and orange piece. And now I've set up the last pair, which is this blue and white piece, which goes and pairs with this guy. And so now all that's left is to permute the midges, and you're done. Okay, so then this is the next scramble. Once again, solving the corners. You should be able to do this. If you're good at 2x2, you should be able to do this during the entire inspection. You should see the entire solve in the inspection. I'm not a fantastic 2x2 solver, so I can probably see the whole solve in the inspection, maybe 1 in 8 solves, but an expert can see it in every solve. So that's definitely a huge advantage because your recognition time is 0 if you already know what case it's going to be. So definitely to take advantage of this, it's good to be a good 2x2 solver. And so it also has the advantage that it reduces the number of things you need to practice, because as you practice LMCF, you get better at 2x2, you practice 2x2, you get better at LMCF. So I'm going to solve on blue here. And so trying to do a rotationless solve here, I'm going to put this blue L on the bottom. Okay, so now I've solved the blue face and the bars at the back. So this is an EG1 case. So now I've solved the green corners, well, all the corners. And again, as soon as I finish this algorithm, I'm looking for oriented edge pieces on the top layer. Now, blue or green. Again, this is because I solved blue. I'm solving on blue and green. Now there are none. So this is a slightly more challenging case. You have a little bit less time, but what immediately stands out to me as I'm twisting the cube as I finish the corners algorithm, I see I have one candidate E-slice edge here, which is the blue and white, that can start up my first pair. I also have a very easy to solve edge piece here, which is the blue and orange, which doesn't even need to be paired if I don't want it to be. And that's right across from the blue and orange slot, so that's very, very fast to solve. I also see I have this green and white piece which is displaced, and so that's very, very easy to pair up with any other piece. And so I already see here what I'm going to do for my solve. So considering these are the only three pieces that I can easily see, except for this guy over here, what I'm going to do is I'm first going to solve the blue and orange piece into here. And then I'm going to solve the blue and white piece and the green and white piece as a pair right after that. So I rotate, and then I solve that guy. And so now I want to solve the blue and white piece and the green and white piece. And so I do an L2 here, and then so now I've paired up those guys. Now I have the blue and red piece here, which is the next E-slice edge, and so that needs to go into the blue and red slot. And there's a green and red piece here, which is easy to pair up, and it's going to go across from here. And so I go like this. Now those guys are solved. Now all I have left is these two edges in the R slice. And so now this is a Waterman L6E situation, where, I mean, you can solve this intuitively. It's just going to take a lot more moves, and so the best way to solve this is to use this is Waterman set 6. So the idea here is you solve two edges in the R slice, the last two, while simultaneously orienting the edges in the M slice. And now in this case, I can quickly see that all the M slice edges are already oriented. So I got to select the right case, because you could have zero, you can have all the M slice edges oriented, you could have two of them disoriented adjacent, two of them disoriented diagonal, or all four of them disoriented. So in this case, it's pretty simple. So there's the Waterman algorithm, and then that's it. The solve is done. So I want to talk a little bit more about the transition phase, which again is the most important part of the solve, and it makes or breaks the solve, because you need smooth look ahead, no pauses between solving the corners and solving the edges. Now there's a lot of cases for the transition phase, and not all of them showed up in the examples. So I'm just going to create some like random situations. And so first of all, you need to understand that, you know, when you finish solving the corners, you're looking for oriented edge pieces on the top. Now here I have, if I'm solving the blue and green corners, I've got a blue oriented edge piece and I have a green oriented edge piece. And then I have two pieces that are like random. Now what I was doing in the examples is the oriented piece, very, very easy, just M and then some combination of U and then M. So that's really, really easy. You know, it is possible to do the same thing on the D face. So here I have an oriented edge piece in the D face. I can go M prime D M, but you know, it's definitely not it's not as fast solving on the D face, but you know, you can do it. Now there's two other cases that are important. So one of them is when you have an oriented edge piece that's the opposite color, like green here, and the other one is when you have a disoriented edge piece that's in the opposite position. So you have opposite colors here, white and yellow. So this piece needs to go here. And so the first example is like, let's just say that, let's say here that, so let's just say that this is what I ended up with after the corners. So in this case, I don't have any blue edge pieces that are oriented, but I do have a green one. And so what I can do here is this is the green and white piece, and so I need to do a D prime to make sure that I've got the green and white ready on the bottom. And it's just like, it's really quick. So I basically do an M prime, U2, M. And then now I've solved that piece. And so again, like, it's really important to try to solve one edge piece during the transition phase so that you can look at the other pieces on the cube while you're solving that, so that you can examine the E-slicer and some of the other edge pieces so that you can see what's going on, so you can see your first pair before you even finish solving that first edge piece, so there's a continuous flow. I'd also want to mention, like, it is actually possible on some solves to just keep solving edge pieces in this orientation. Like here I've got the green and white one solved here, and then I've got this, this orange and green piece which I can solve, and then there's the white and blue one here, and sometimes you can solve almost all of the edge pieces, but the problem is you're solving them one at a time, and so it's not that fast. And you're better off just solving one or two and then moving on to the E2L phase where you hold your favorite colors on the left and right. The other thing is that if you have this situation, you have a disoriented edge piece that's the opposite color, this is really easy. You just do an M prime and then a U and then an M, and then you've solved it. And this brings up the next situation where you have an edge piece that is of the opposite color, so it's a green edge piece and it's disoriented. Now this, you don't solve this while holding the cube in this position, but this is very favorable because first of all, it's an easy thing to pair or create a triplet with, and so if you see a piece like this, you don't actually have to have a pair. If you can't see anything else, you just take this piece and then you find the slot where it goes to, and then you just go 3 moves and you put it in. And so those are sort of the most likely situations that arise. And there's a whole bunch of other tricks that you can do when you're doing this. And so, for example, let's say that you have a situation. Let's see here. So let's say you have a situation like this. So you just finished the corners. Now you see there's a green oriented edge piece here, and it's the opposite color, so this is very easy to solve. Now as you're just as you're about to solve it, you see that you don't have any edge pieces in the E-slice. Like there's no green and blue edge pieces in the E-slice to start your first pair. And so what will happen? So basically, what will happen in this case is that if you see this piece here, you can do a big, as you bring this piece to front, normally you just do a U, but you can do a wide U instead as you're about to solve it. And then this moves the E-slice, and then now I see I have a blue edge here. So then while I'm solving this, I've basically moved the E-slice without adding any extra moves. And so that's another way that you can see more of the cube without actually having to rotate it or anything. And then there are situations when you it's really rare, but there are situations that you'll get when you don't have any, you have no edge pieces in the E-slice. And in situations like that, there's a bunch of different things that you can do. Normally what will happen is if you solve pieces that are in the top and bottom layer, eventually what happens is you'll end up with a situation where you have disoriented edge pieces like this of the opposite color. And then what you can do is you can create pairs that have no slices, no edges in the E-slice. And so for example, here I have this blue and yellow piece that goes into this slot here. I also see that there's this disoriented green and orange piece which goes into this slot. And so now I can use an E2L algorithm, but I just ignore it's actually a triplet algorithm, but I ignore the M slice. And so I go F prime, and then I've solved those guys without actually having any pieces in in the M slice, but then I've displaced a piece, and so then now I can go on to the next pair, which would in this case be these guys, right? So anyway, that's just the general, like, sort of how to deal with really, really bad situations. And now there's another thing you can do, and that is that some people don't like the ergonomics about having to move the slices, the L and R slices, and so during the transition phase, in some situations you can solve 3 pieces of like the top layer, and then you'll basically end up in a Waterman situation where you have just the keyhole slot on the upper left, and the whole rest of the solve is just wide R, U, and M moves. And so that like improves your ergonomics, but it also decreases your choices in terms of pairs and triplets. And so it decreases the statistics of the solve, and so your chance of getting a really low move count solve are lower if you do that, but your TPS might be higher. So that's one thing to think of. And then there's there's even way more tricks, and so another one of them is that you can try to solve 2 edge pieces that are adjacent on the top layer, and then rotate the cube so that those are in the back, the down back, and so then you still can see these 2 slots, and the invisible part of the cube is already solved. And if you want, you can even do that on the top and bottom layer when you're in the transition phase. Or if you solve one edge on the top and one edge on the bottom, then you put those in the bottom part of the cube. So you're kind of getting more into like a Roux situation where you almost have blocks, and you're trying to put the solved pieces in the back part of the cube where you don't need to see them, so that you can see more of the cube. Look ahead in the E2L phase is very, very, it does have some similarities to CFOP, where you are basically trying to predict where your pieces are going to be. So with each E2L algorithm, you need to sort of learn where does the pieces that you're not solving go. That's sort of more of an advanced technique. And then one of the other things that'll happen sometimes when you're solving is that you accidentally end up with both sides completely solved. And in this case, I have 2 disoriented edge pieces here, and so it's pretty simple. So now I've oriented them, and then you permute the midges, and so you should memorize the algorithms for permuting the M slice or orienting the M slice in the case where you accidentally have both sides solved. So those are a couple other small details, but definitely the transition phase is really, really important. Seeing your first pair in the transition so you can transition from corners to your first pair. Once you get your first pair going, you're moving the cube, and if you're good, you're not looking at the pieces you're solving. You're looking at the other pieces so you can predict your next pair and then your next one, and then at the end of the solve, as you're approaching the last 6 edges, this is another important trick, and that is that the way you solve the last couple of pieces, that will control the case that you get. And so let's just set up an example here. So let's see how I can do this here. So okay, so this is a good example. So let's say that this is the end of the solve. So I've got this blue-red piece here, and it's supposed to go into this slot. So it's the piece that I kind of want to solve next. The green and white piece is here, and it's supposed to go here. So if I just do a basic 3-mover, now I just set up a Waterman set 3. for the last 6 edges. That's quite a number of algorithms. Maybe you don't know that set. And so the other option is to solve these two as a pair, right? And then now I just have a basic L5E setup where I'm looking at the orientation of these two guys, and then it's solved. And so, in that case, if I solve them as a pair, well, it takes me more moves to solve the pair. But then I have, I set up a case that I actually know, or I can solve that edge piece with fewer moves, but then I set up the Waterman situation, which I may not know. So, that's just kind of one example. There's many situations where if you plan ahead, you can set up an L5 or an L6 case where you actually know those algorithms, and you can force a case that you actually know, which is important, because if you end up with a case you don't know, then you have to intuitively solve it into a case that you do, and you waste a bunch of moves. So that's it for now. And so those are some examples. There is a lot more different variations, and there's a lot more tricks that you can learn. You can see all the algorithms and stuff in the LMCF document, which is a lengthy document you can find in the description, and you can read through that. I just want to stress that this method, it has a lot of things going for it, and then it has some challenges as well. So the first thing is that although you have excellent chances of low move count solves, you do get solves that are occasionally like 50 to 55 moves. So not all the solves are going to be 40 to 45 moves. At the same time, you do get quite often 33 to 35 move solves, and sometimes you can even get 27, 28 move solves, especially if you get a CLL skip. And so the other thing that is really advantageous is once you solve the corners, you have an extremely good chance of having randomly solved edges, which is one of the best things going with this method. Sometimes you can have, about half the time you'll have one edge that's randomly solved. It's not uncommon to have 2 or even 3 edges that are randomly solved. And the other thing is that I was solving these as edge pairs, but quite often you can solve them as triplets. In an ideal case, you'll solve the corners and then you'll solve 2 triplets, and then you're already at L6E, and then your solve is essentially done. So that's good. The ergonomics of, so E2L, when you solve in the middle phase, when you're solving the edge pieces, which we call E2L, or edges of the 2 layers, there's a couple of challenges. Some people look at the algs and they say, oh, some of these don't look that like finger trick friendly or ergonomic, and that's true. I put all the algs in there so that you know that every case can be solved. But not every case should be solved. Some of the algs that have B moves, you might want to skip. So in some cases, you'll solve edges as singles and then immediately solve the displaced edge and set up another pair. And so some of the algs for the E2L, the pair algs, are only, depending on the reflection, some of them use F moves instead of B moves, and those will be more effective to use. So you have to, the point here is not to do stuff that's not finger trick friendly. You need to do finger trick friendly stuff, or your solve is going to be slow. So it takes a lot of experience to figure out as you're solving, is that a finger trick friendly pair? You don't solve the pair as a pair unless it's finger trick friendly and fast. You should be able to solve, your pair algorithms should be sub 1 second, and preferably sub 0.6. If your pair alg takes longer than 1.0 seconds, then it's not finger trick friendly enough to be effective. Now with the triplets, it's a bit different. The triplets, you're solving 3 pieces, so you can have a 1.5 second triplet alg, and that's going to be still effective to do. So that's something to keep in mind. Triplets will happen at least, I'd say, 1 out of 2 solves, sometimes more. And then when it gets to the last 6 edges, you can choose how many algorithms you want to learn. There's quite a lot of cases if you learn all of them, including all the Waterman sets, but you only need, really, to solve the last 6 edges, you really only need 10 algorithms. One of the L5E sets, and then the cases where you have just one edge disoriented on the L or R side, and there's 2 different cases for that. So the great thing about this method is that you can actually get really fast with almost no algs. So if you do the beginner's method or the intermediate method where you use Ortega for the corners and then you learn only like 2 or 3 of the E2L pair algorithms, and then you do the basic L5E, which is 10 algorithms, then you basically have about 26 algorithms, and they're short algorithms. And so in that case, with those 26 algorithms, you can easily solve the cube in 12 seconds if you have quick hands. In some cases, you might even be able to get sub 10 if you have a low move count solve. And so that's, if you use just those basic algorithms, your move count's going to be probably around 60 per solve instead of 40 to 45 if you know like the hundreds of algs in the full set. But still, like, that's pretty fast for such a few algorithms. And I think that for a beginner or intermediate method, that's probably the fastest method that you can have for such a few number of algorithms. And it also means that if you're interested in this method, you can start with those 26 algorithms. If you look at my document, I point them out. And then if you like it and you find the method is fun and has potential, then you just add more sets. And as each set you add, your times go up. Your times get faster because your move count drops. And it's also really fun because you always have new things to add. One of the problems with some of the other methods is that it's kind of like you stagnate because you don't really know what else to add. Of course, with there are advanced things you can do with CFOP and Roux that that you can add ZBLL or OLLCP, and with Roux you can add like multiple CML cases so you can modify the edges and stuff. So I'm not saying there's not some things you can always add with those as well, but in this case it's just kind of fun because there's always new sets that you can add, and there's always new things to develop. And I've been working on this for about a year now. And I mean, I'm not a super fast solver. Like I turn like 3 to 4 TPS, but I still, I often get 12-second solves, and I get quite often sub 10s as well. Although I don't average sub 10, but it's for sure possible to average sub 8 with this method, especially with the low move count and the extreme fast singles. I mean, the sky is the limit. If you get a sub 30 move single, you could be looking at like a 3-second solve if you get lucky. Those like sub 30 move probably happens like, I don't know, I'm thinking like 1 in 500 solves. Not super often, but I mean, what other method is going to get you a sub 30 move solve? Pretty much none. So there are people who they say, oh, it's a corners first method, and corners first is like old school, obsolete, and that that's kind of a valid argument, but it's not, because Waterman's method was actually really fast, just nobody really learned it. Except for him, nobody really knew all the algorithms, and some people have gotten pretty fast with it, but not a lot of people have used it. And so, if you give the method a chance, you'll find that it actually has big potential. I'm not necessarily saying that it's going to be faster than CFOP with ZBLL or Roux, but I'd say it's definitely as fast on average, and probably for fast singles, maybe even you can get faster singles on lucky solves. So that's it for now.